All right, well, we are back once again. Welcome back to the Dungan-Mott Music and Movie Podcast. And we are back to do the second part of the Eric Clapton discography. This one we should cover all the bases in this episode, where we ain't got to do another one after this. And we left off with the album Another Ticket. Now on to Money and Cigarettes. It'd been kind of a full year since Clapton had put out an album pretty much. He didn't release anything in 82. He recorded this album in 82. And initially, the album was recorded with the lineup that recorded the previous album. But from what I understand, um, the basically the studio said basically it's not really kind of it had kind of a pub atmosphere, and it was just kind of basically the record label um basically uh, well
Rejecting
no
it and say they needed a new band.
yeah, and I was confused here, but it was actually producer Tom Dowd that told him to change to a new band. It wasn't the record label. And yeah, this album, this was the first after his first rehabilitation from alcoholism, and he went on tour for the Another Ticket album in '81, and ran into some trouble there. I think he got like an ulcer in his stomach around that time, and he went into rehab for alcohol and stuff, and then went in, like I said, to make this album, and he reunited with producer Tom Dowd, who had produced his earlier studio albums. And yeah, basically they changed everyone in the band except for Albert Lee and Chris Stanton. He brought in session drummer Roger Hawkins, bassist extraordinaire Donald Duck Dunn, Peter Sawley on Hammond organ, which is very cool. That's pretty cool. And Albert Lee on guitar, Ry Cooder on electric guitar, and Eric Clapton on guitar, of course. And I was actually wrong. Chris Stanton is not on this album. So that was interesting. I thought he was. But basically, the album was called Money and Cigarettes because basically that's all Clapton found himself with after being rehabilitated after his succumbed to alcoholism. But on this album initially, I really did not like when I first heard it. I thought it was a very weak album, other than a few tracks. But I've grown this album quite a bit. It's actually one I've heard many times now. And I mean, just going track by track real quick. Everybody ought to make a change. Great opening track, great blues cover. The Shape Your End's a great track. Ain't Going Down's an awesome track. I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart was kind of the big single off the album. I really like that track. Man Overboard's really good. Pretty Girl's a good track. That's kind of the wonderful night of the album. Man in Love's cool. Crosscut Saw, Slow Down Linda, and Crazy Country Hop. Very solid album. I think I've covered pretty much everything on this whole kind of mini review of the album here. But basically, it says here that Clapton suffered from multiple collapses. I'm assuming into alcoholism during the recording of the album. But I mean, this album to me, I really enjoy this album, and I kind of feel like I ain't covered everything here, but that's pretty much. I mean, it's a very relatively short album. It's 37 minutes, and this would be the first to be released on the Reprise Duck Records, and I mean, it was moderately successful at the time. The critical reception was lukewarm, and yeah, this would kind of be the last of kind of the country country-ish albums that Clapton would do. After this, of course, we'll get into it in a few minutes. But that's pretty much. You've got Chuck Kirkpatrick on backing vocals, also John Sambataro on backing vocals, as well as Chuck Kirkpatrick. And this was produced by Tom Dowd and Eric Clapton. And that's pretty much all I've got for this album. Like I said, at first I didn't really care for it, but now I actually really enjoy it. It's recorded in '82 at Compass Point Studios in Nassau, Bahamas. And first with Duck and Warner Brothers Records. So that's all for me. What about you, Steven?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say my favorite song off the album would be Ain't Going Down. That was written by Eric Clapton, and that's got some very interesting lyrics to it.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, whether it either has a deep meaning to it or it doesn't really mean anything. It was just kind of written on when they were high or something,
Yeah.
But anyway, I kind of have an idea of which one of those it is, but great song overall, in my opinion. Most of the time, you don't really have to know what it's about, but that's beside the point. The whole album, it's really kind of more fast paced type of songs on this album, with the exception of a few. It's great guitar work, kind of more guitar based. The organ, I thought the organ was really good, especially on Pretty Girl. I think the organ was very good on that one, in particular. I like the band. Donald Duck Dunn on bass, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I really like the work he did a lot. And to me, this was another album I would give a 10 out of 10 for, in my opinion. I've always liked it. It's kind of more rock and roll based, in my opinion. So I guess that's about all I got.
All righty. Well, I pretty much I've covered it myself. I like the keyboard player on here, Peter Soley. He was the original keyboardist for Whitesnake. So I don't know if you know that or not.
No, I didn't know that, but I know he did a good job on this album.
Yeah, he played on the first Whitesnake. He played on the first. I want to say he played only on the Snakebite EP from '78, but I could be wrong. But this has got it's kind of a lot more of kind of Albert Lee and Clapton kind of guitar duels, I guess, or dual guitar on it, and I like that quite a bit. And or at least them sharing the solo, not really get a dual guitar or anything like that. But Donald Duck Dunn, great bass player. He would stay with Clapton after this for the next album. And Roger Hawkins, he was a drummer. He was big into the Muscle Shoals scene, Muscle Shoals recording studio and all that. So he was a veteran session musician, and he's a great drummer as well. When they went out on tour, I don't think he ever played with them, but he did. He was replaced by Jamie Oldacre, so it was kind of a reunion in sorts for Jamie Oldacre to come back. And the next album was kind of a reunion in sorts for a few members. But that's pretty much all I've got for the album as well. And then we move to they tour from '83 through '84, and that's where things start to really kind of change as far as the sound goes. And then Clapton puts out the album Behind the Sun in 1985. This would be his first involvement with Phil Collins. It would be produced by him and Phil Collins both. Um, Basically, it was basically the some tracks had a pretty standard um band to it, and then others featured a lot more session musicians. And this is also the first collaboration with songwriter Jerry Lynn Williams, who would come in to play a lot more on some other albums. And I mean, this is a great album. Basically, I think it was another one of the things to where he recorded a version of the album with a standard band, and then as time went on, the record company said this we need more songs, and basically, I think it was like they needed something that was more of a single for the album. So they went in with like Jerry Lynn Williams, and this is where like I believe Steve Lukather's on here, Lindsey Buckingham's on here as well, um, Greg Fillingane's, Nathan East. That's where all of those people came in, and the primary people on here. I mean, the primary standard band is Donald Duck Dunn, Jamie Oldacre, Chris Stanton. Phil Collins is on here as well sporadically, and got a very good band here. And I mean the tracks on the album is She's Waiting is a great song. See What Love Can Do is very good. Same Old Blues, of course, is a very slow, long blues track. Knock on Wood's good. Something's Happening. Forever Man, It All Depends. Tangled in Love. Never Make You Cry. Just Like a Prisoner. And Behind the Sun. All great tracks. Then we got the track Loving Your Lovin', which was a bonus track. It wasn't included on the album, but was kind of a bonus track. It was released on the Wayne's World soundtrack. Heaven is One Step Away was released on the Back to the Future soundtrack in 85 or 86, and was later on the Crossroads box set, as was the track Too Bad. Jailbait was released as a B-side to She's Waiting. You Don't Know Like I Know was released only in Australia. And there's another track called One Jump Ahead of the Storm, which is unissued. So that's pretty much all I've got to say. And now on to you, Steve.
Well, I thought Behind the Sun as an album overall was Clapton's kind of first step towards that popish sort of sound, and Phil Collins inspired a lot, and but I think this was kind of a very necessary thing also for him, because if he wouldn't have went this way or this direction, he probably would have ran out of material, and he probably would have just kind of did like a lot of people do and just kind of go downhill from there, and probably wouldn't have went as far as he did, in my opinion. He would have kept doing the blues covers and what he usually does, and with a different band and all, it probably wouldn't have worked out either. So with the band members and the songs themselves, I think it had to be, the way it was, or it wasn't going to be commercially successful. And this is probably one of his more successful albums as far as money and sales from it too. If I had to guess, I don't know that for sure, but up to date, it was probably the most probably the one that was most popular at the time. Because blues is probably always going to be the same. It's not going to be the most popular genre. It's just going to be a certain amount of people that like it, and then nobody else really knows or cares about it. There's only a select few of people that even know about it, But this genre is more, it's a lot more popular even now, the pop culture and all that. Huh?
It's more accessible.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, that's my opinion. I think that if he didn't go this direction about this time, then he probably would have started going downhill before he went uphill,
Yeah. And I mean, it went number 34 on the U.S. Billboard 200. It went platinum, so I mean, it did fairly well as far as sales. And when I said like it was some sort of reunion for this, I mean, you had like Marcy Levy came back, as well as Jamie Oldacre. And this would be the final albums with both of them on it, and they would do the subsequent tour afterwards. But I mean, you've got a plethora of session musicians. Jeff Porcaro from Toto's on here. Like I said, Steve Lukather's on here. I mean, you've got all kinds of people. Lenny Castro on congas. Ray Cooper's on this album. I mean, all sorts of people. And I think Ted Templeman and Lenny Waronker or something like that, they did the other tracks that kind of were recorded after the fact. And this, like I said, it had some tinkering from the studio and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for it. I like this album. To me, it's kind of the final classic sounding Clapton that kind of harkens more back like 70s Clapton. And really, I still like it though. I mean, but I think this is kind of one of the more, especially with the tour. This is before he really changed, even as far as like his guitar tone kind of changed after this, and his albums were a lot more polished and stuff like that. But then we go to the next album. You don't have anything else to say about Behind the Sun, do you?
No.
All right. But then we go to one, and this one we probably won't spend a whole lot on because this is kind of like a footnote, really. The soundtrack "Edge of Darkness." Of course, the title track resurfaced for 24 Nights. I've heard this. For what it was okay. It definitely wasn't mind blowing or anything like this. And basically, it was a score recorded for this TV show or whatever, this British TV show. And for what it was, I mean, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't nothing that blew my mind or anything like that. I knew Edge of Darkness. I like that. And I don't have this album. I've never seen where you could buy it. So I mean, it's interesting. That's all I can really say. The cover's cool. It's got a picture of Clapton, I believe, from the Forever Man video. And that was actually going back to Behind the Sun. Forever Man was his first music video, so he was kind of entering into the MTV generation there. But yeah, your thoughts on Edge of Darkness if you've ever heard it?
To be honest, I haven't really heard the song or the album or anything like that, as far as the soundtrack and all that. So I the only thing I can say is it kind of orchestra?
Yeah, it's Michael Kamen with him, so yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's probably more based on orchestra stuff, which a lot of people can't relate to anyway, as much as main is like pop and rock and stuff like that anyway. So I mean, really, it's probably more suited towards like the intro of a episode for a movie or something like that. So
Yeah.
probably a lot of people probably can't relate to it as much as the other music anyway. So
Yeah. But like I said, I mean, for what it was okay. I want to talk about real quick before we move on to I want to talk about the Behind the Sun tour. Tour for that album was pretty cool. There's a video out there from Hartford. It was recorded during the tour. There's several bootlegs from the tour out there. This was the debut of White Room for the first time, I believe, since his Cream days. He brought the track back for his live shows, and it's remained a staple throughout his career since. And I mean, I like that show that they put out. I don't think it's ever been released on DVD, but the band for that, it was Chris Stanton, Jamie Oldacre, Donald Duck Dunn, Tim Rennick on guitar, and Clapton on guitar as well, and Marcy Levy and Sean Murphy on backing vocals. But that's pretty much all I got to say. You got any thoughts on the tour for Behind the Sun?
Are you talking about that Hartford video?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
1985? Yeah, I've seen that before. It's pretty much just like, it sounds pretty much like the album. I mean, the stuff they did, they didn't do a lot of different material as far as blues or anything like that. I think they just mainly stuck to the album stuff. You know, it's because that's the way the band was kind of built, I guess.
Yeah. And I like the show. I like Tangled in Love. The live version's cool on there.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same content, like I said before.
Yeah. But then we move to I think kind of one of the more divisive albums in Clapton's career. I think some fans really like it, and there's some fans that really kind of don't. I think some people view this album as more or less a Phil Collins solo album with Clapton singing on it. But I love this album, and that I heard it a couple of days ago in its entirety again, and the first time in a while. And that is August, released in 1986. It was produced almost all the way through by Phil Collins. It was there's one track on here produced by Tom Dowd. And this is kind of the first album in a while where Clapton kind of had a standard band, and that consisted of Eric Clapton, um, Nathan East, Greg Gaines, and Phil Collins, along with a horn section consisting of Michael Brecker, Dave Bargeron, Randy Brecker, and John Faddis, and along with Leon Pendarvis, who was actually part of the Blues Brothers band later on. He's on, and you got some other musicians I'll talk about here in a few minutes. But I mean, this is a great album to me. Even with the opening track, it's in the way that you use it, which is co-written by Robbie Robertson. Um, this is the one song that features a different lineup. This is Gary Brooker on keyboards and backing vocals, Richard Cottle on synthesizer, Lawrence Cottle on bass, who would go on to play as a session musician on Black Sabbath's Headless Cross album from '89, and also features the return of Henry Spinetti on drums. So I mean, that track's a very good one. I think that was a music video. Run's a great track. Tearing Us Apart, which was a duet with Tina Turner. Of course, afterwards he would do different with different vocalists along with him. Sometimes I've seen him sing it all together. But Bad Influence, Walk Away. Walk Away is one of them I think could have been left off possibly. This had a co-write with Marcy Levy under her real name Marcella Detroit. And Hung Up on Your Love, probably my favorite on the album. Take a Chance and Hold On could have probably been left off. Miss You's great. Holy Mother's awesome. Behind the Mask is a really cool song. Grand Illusion was kind of a bonus track. It's really good. The other track that was actually released on the Crossroads box set, Want to Make Love to You, I like that track quite a bit as well. It was a live staple there at the time. Lady of Verona's a cool track, but the other track, Walking the White Line, I've never heard. So I mean, this is said that this was Clapton's biggest selling album to date. So I mean, it had a lot of hype behind it, and I think it was more or less it sold really well, but the reception for the album wasn't that great. But this cemented Clapton's comeback and kind of presented kind of more of a guitar focused material. And yeah, what's your thoughts on August, Steve?
Well, like you said, guitar focused. I would agree with that. And it's pretty much pop stuff. And really kind of guitar based pop is what it is mainly.
Yeah.
Rock. I mean rock elements to it, but mainly pop in my opinion. I would. This is another album I would give a pretty good nine. Well, not nine. I'd say 10 out of 10. Because I like all the tracks on it. And I would agree with the people that say that it's more like a Phil Collins solo album, or the sound of it. I don't know how much he had to do with the writing of any of the stuff Behind the Sun or August. He probably didn't have a whole lot to do with it in the first place, but the sound itself of the music does have a lot of Phil Collins stuff, sound and stuff, because he produced it, you know. And in my opinion, it's not like a him solo album. It's more like a Clapton album, you know, with which is what it was. Phil Collins pretty much engineering the sound of it and having a
Yeah,
lot to do with the instrumentation of it and the synthesizers, and probably having a lot to do with the personnel too. You know, had control
yeah.
over that, I would guess. And great instrumentation on it though. You know, as far as the pop world goes, I'm not a big fan, but you know, as always, to me, Clapton and always seems to get the best musicians for anything he does. So to me, it turned out to be uh, a great idea. You know, to bring back the pop stuff he had been doing. Uh, and like I said before, it's really if he didn't do that or go that direction, or at least something like that, he probably would have spiraled downward and might not even came back much more, you know, after that if he wouldn't have. So I guess that's all for me, brother, on that one.
All right, and I mean that's pretty much it for me as well. I one of my personal favorite Clapton albums. I really enjoyed the album, and this would kind of be. I mean, Nathan East has been with him many times since, as well as Greg Gaines and Phil Collins. Really didn't have a whole lot to do with him after this. He performed on the tour for the album with him, but as for the Phil Collins himself doing other albums and stuff with him, this was kind of the final kind of involvement in the studio with Phil Collins. He did appear on the next album, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. But yeah, I like August. Um, some people I've seen doesn't really like it, but I like it quite a bit. One of my personal favorite Clapton albums. And then we move to 1988. I want to touch on a couple of things in '88 real quick. The Crossroads box set was released that year, and a great box set. It was a 4 disc box set, had a booklet inside of it, and basically it's an extended version of a greatest hits compilation, and it brings in music from all of the eras of Clapton's career, and I thought that was a very great thing to have. I have it. It's got a lot of unreleased stuff on it, but he also released a soundtrack to the I'm assuming it's a movie, Homeboy. I don't know. I think it's another score, and yeah, that's pretty much it for 1988. 1989 rolls around, and he puts out his album Journeyman. I like Journeyman quite a bit as well. It was kind of marketed and kind of looked at as more of his as a concept album. I mean, not a concept album, a comeback album, and it's basically because it kind of brought back some of the blues flavor from the previous albums. You've got great tracks. Pretending's awesome, which was a Jerry Lynn Williams track. Anything for Your Love, which was another Jerry Lynn Williams song. Bad Love, this featured, I believe, Phil Collins on drums. And he was also in the video for the track. Running on Face, great. Hard Times, Hound Dog, No Alibis, Run So Far, Old Love, Breaking Point, and Leave Me On, and Before You Accuse Me. I really enjoy this track. There's some outtakes that I've never heard. Well, I've heard Forever is a good track. Um, I've heard that track. Don't Turn Your Back and Something About You, I don't think I've ever heard before. But this is another one that has a lot of different session musicians on here. I mean, Robert Cray's on here at one point. It's got a whole bunch of musicians. I'm not even going to try to get into going through them. And this went number 16 on Billboard 200 and went double platinum in the United States. And Clapton considers this one of his favorite albums. So that's pretty much all I've got here. And this was kind of after the kind of a lot of drum machines and stuff like that on um, August. He kind of brought it back to simple, a more simple raw production on this album. And I don't know who actually produced this album. I think Russ Titleman, and he would go on to do a lot of albums for Clapton later. But your thoughts on Journeyman, Stephen?
Well, I think the Journeyman album is real good. I've got it as well on CD. This is a lot of his albums, but I listened to it quite a bit. Old Love, Bad Love. These two will be kind of a live staple, especially Old Love in the long run. He's done that one quite a bit. He wrote that with Robert Cray, I believe, and they split up the guitar parts for it.
Yep.
This is kind of this for the whole album in general. The kind of sound, like you said, a little bit more raw of a production. Russ Titleman, producer. He produced a lot later on. I like his work too. I think the album is really more coming back to the blues type of sound too.
Yeah.
Even the rock stuff like Bad Love, it has a kind of a bluesy feel to it, in my opinion. Kind of a little bit darker sound. And I think it's a lot more blues inspired. And I don't think Clapton ever really lost touch with the blues. It's just during the mid '80s, he just kind of he felt it kind of necessary to go a different direction with it, or he was kind of go down more. But since he had so much success with that, he's kind of coming towards the latter part of his career after this, and then going into the '90s. So really, getting into about his 40s. So he's gonna come into stuff where he's not gonna try to get maybe number one hits off anything. He's just trying to focus more on his roots and going back to the blues and not necessarily going towards the main public. This album was somewhat that, but anything after this, in my opinion, was really just mainly for his more fans rather than just the complete all of the population. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I guess that's all I got to say about that one, brother.
All right, and also the same year he released Lethal Weapon 2 soundtrack. He was involved with that series. I think he done all 4 movies he did stuff for. But then we moved to the next album here, and that is, if I'm not bad wrong, 24 Nights. 24 Nights is it's another one of my favorite Clapton live albums. I've heard it several times. Great version of Badge, Running on Fate. This the whole album's great to me. I wish there was a little bit more stuff on there, like if they could have released an extended edition or something, that would have been cool. But I mean, it's split up. You've got the four piece band, and you've got a blues band, and you've got the I believe 9-piece band, and then orchestra nights, and there's one band missing, and that's the 13-piece band, which is just a 9-piece band with a horn section. But originally in the '80s, I think he was going to release a live album from the August tour, but that never happened. But this album's great. This was actually released on my birthday in 1991, but I was born a whole decade later in 2001. But that's interesting. Looking at it now, it was released on my birthday back in 1991. So Yeah, what about you, Stephen? What's your thoughts on 24 Nights?
Well, I think it's necessary. Well, not necessarily. I can't think of the right word, but essentially, I think it's essentially just live journeyman, um, with kind of a twist with more musicians, and but I think it's kind of the same songs and kind of in the same spirit as the Journeyman album was kind of recorded in. Um, a lot of different things along with those 24 nights at the Royal Albert Hall. This is probably his favorite venue to play at. It's probably why this turned out so well. And this is probably about the time that he would have started getting sober. So this is probably the last album to where he was really it was kind of drunken sessions, and this is probably the last album to where that really was going on. He was still on any kind of drugs or anything. So in my opinion, he does a lot better in anything after that. Unplugged on for me, in my opinion, is his best work, mainly because he's fully sober, and he's about himself all the time, and you can make better decisions about stuff and perform well, if you're sober. So that's about all for that, brother.
All right, and yeah, there was a video. I have the old school VHS version of the video. The video has some songs taken off of it, and I was kind of confused the first time I watched. I was like, "Where the crap is these songs?" But then I found out later that they were taken off the video itself because of time constraints. I'm assuming, but he in 1992 he did the soundtrack to Lethal Weapon 3 and a soundtrack called Rush. And I'm not going to get into Rush a whole lot because it's going to kind of play in more to the album I'm fixing to talk about right now. And that is 1992's Eric Clapton Unplugged. In my opinion, this is the album that brought Clapton back on the map. I mean, of course, I believe it was 91. He lost his son. And I mean, just hearing the way that his son died, I mean, it was a terrible accident that happened. And I mean, if you don't know what happened, I mean, go look it up. But it was a terrible way, especially in the way that it happened. It was terrible. But I mean, regardless, anyway, it would be terrible. But this album, Tears in Heaven, that I was talking about Rush. It was originally on that, I believe, and then they put it on Unplugged, and it went through the roof. This is where he started to get more back into the blues. Sure enough, because he had like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, rolling and tumbling, walking blues, malt and milk, stuff like that on this album. And I mean, it was kind of there was some Journeyman tracks, a great version of Old Love that was acoustically on the album. He also had Layla, which was probably, we've talked about it in our episode on Derek Domino's Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. Kind of that was the version that I think everybody knows. But your thoughts on Unplugged, Steven?
The Unplugged album, in my opinion, is a masterpiece within itself. I think, well, Clapton himself, what he said about it was he wanted to put it out as a limited edition. In other words, limited track listing and not really anything following up that, any kind of tour or anything. But that there was an Unplugged tour, and it pretty much his one of his best selling albums. And what he said basically was that the reason it sold so well is because of the fact, first of all, that his son had gotten killed, about a year previous to this, and everybody had heard about it, and so they didn't have any other way of sending their condolences rather than just see a Clapton album that came out in '92 and just buy it. he said that's probably why it did so well. And as for the album itself, uh, I've always thought it was perfectly arranged. But I'll never know why, you know, Circus and My Father's Eyes wasn't on the original album. I would have replaced it with at least, the blues, like Walking Blues or Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. I would have took those two and replaced them with Circus Love Town and My Father's Eyes, in my opinion, because those two would be on Pilgrim and I believe 98, something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, I think that, in my opinion, they really sounded better, on the Unplugged almost than they did on the Pilgrim album. Uh, and that's just my opinion, but at least they released it. And there's a track that was the very last track off the deluxe edition, um, a blues one, uh, Worried Life Blues. And really, I
Yeah.
think he did a masterful job on that song too, acoustically. And I think that should have been on the album as well. But
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, if if they want to put it out as a certain way and they think that's the best, and that's their issue. But it did well as it was. So I think it's a good album, and obviously with the same setup, it's gonna have the same productive. Production's not gonna have a huge part in it. That's what I'm trying to say. It will, but then it won't because it's acoustic and it's not. You can't change the sound of that much, and uh, it just took things in a little bit of different direction, and I think it's overall a good album. I guess that's all for me there, brother.
All right. And yeah, I mean, from what I heard, I saw that Clapton, the reason he left those songs off is basically because he felt they weren't good enough to be. He felt that he needed to work on them some more to get before they got on the album. But I'm like you, I thought they sounded good for what they were as well. But
And he
I
didn't really
mean,
change them any when they were on the Pilgrim album. He didn't really change them at all that much.
yeah, I know, and I mean it. But there's also some tracks on the album that never came up anywhere else. I mean, sign, or either I've heard it pronounced Signé, so I'm assuming that's what it's actually pronounced as, Signé. That was never released on an album, and Lonely Stranger never turned up anywhere else either. So that was pretty weird. I don't even think he's ever performed it after that show.
No.
And that was interesting, and he went on the show saying he was the song San Francisco Bay Blues. He said he would never perform that again. I don't think he ever has. So, um, at least from what I've seen. But
Well, from I know what you're talking about, and on the recording, I think that's the other guitar player, Andy Fairweather Low, talking. I think he's talking about how they did the kazoos. They played the
yeah,
kazoos and the guitars at the same time. I
yeah,
think that's what he's talking about, to be honest.
yeah,
Because people can assume. I mean, I'm assuming too, but it sounds like to me it's his voice, and I'm pretty sure that's what he means because and on any other track either do they do any kind of harmonica or kazoos on the album or anything as far as I can think of, or much anywhere else. I mean,
yeah,
Clapton has had harmonica players, for example, on From the Cradle. He had a lot of harmonica work. He had a lot live stuff, like in Hyde Park. He had a harmonica player, and but just as far as the main people doing it, that was probably what he meant by that.
yeah. But speaking of harmonica players, Unplugged went diamond. So I mean, it was I think it's one of like the most successful albums of all time, I believe. I think it's up there with like Michael Jackson's Thriller as well as like the Eagles' Greatest Hits 1 or something like that. It's one of the best selling albums ever. And it basically after that, I mean he basically decided he was going back to the blues. and he'd done what was his first attempt at an all blues album, and that was 1994's From the Cradle. It was released September 13th, 1994. Um, a back to basics album for Clapton as far as the production went. I mean, it was recorded live in the studio. There was some minor overdubs here and there. You got Clapton, Andy Fairweather Lowe, Chris Stanton, Dave Bronze on bass, Jim Keltner on drums, Richie Hayward percussion on one song, and Jerry Portnoy on harmonica, as well as the kick horns. Great album. It was produced by Russ Titleman. You got tracks. Hoochie Coochie Man, of course, is one of the more well-known tracks on there. 5 Long Years, Reconsider Baby, Third Degree, Blues Before Sunrise, I'm Tore Down, How Long Blues, Motherless Child, It Hurts Me Too, all kind of songs. Someday After a While, Drifting, Groaning the Blues. Great album, one of my personal favorite Clapton albums. So you take it, Stephen, and I'll be right back.
Okay, one of my personal things about this album would be this is my personal favorite as far as Clapton's actual guitar playing on an album. Uh, the only time he plays like that is live. He really played it like a live setting. Um, the guitar work to me is exceptional on this album by Clapton. Lots of blues lead work, and it's to be expected of Clapton with an all blues album, and really all around good good work, And I heard that Hoochie Coochie Man was redone several times because it wasn't to Clapton's satisfactory. Uh, so he just kept on doing that one. And it was probably originally a guitar solo, but instead they decided to do a harmonica solo in place of it, which really is the main part of the song, seeing as, really the other parts are not really featuring any one instrument. It's kind of just stop, and you have to hear it to know what I mean. But uh, just overall, a good album. I'm not sure who it was produced by, to be honest. It was just great production. I think Clapton's voice and his guitar tone is best it's ever been on this album, in my opinion. Uh, he's trying to kind of rediscover himself in the blues, and I think he did that very well. He's done blues covers live throughout his whole career, and he even chose different ones to do in this one. He could have done Crossroads on this one. He could have done, Double Trouble. He could have done any of that really. So really, I mean, I think it's a good idea overall to take songs that he had never really done before, and like not like a lot of people. A lot of people just do the same stuff over and over. But that's one thing about Clapton. On a studio album, especially, he doesn't really do a lot of repetitive things. He tries to vary it, but live he does do a lot of repetitive things. But that's kind of besides the point. Overall, I think I'd give this one a 10 out of 10 for the From the Cradle album.
All right, and I mean, I love this album as well. I think it's one of his best albums, in my opinion. I mean, it is a blues cover album, but you got so many great tracks. The tour after this, it actually it was an all blues set, and I think he had started doing some of that beforehand. But it was no greatest hits or anything like that. It was a standard blues set, and featured basically the band that's on the album, except for originally I can't remember the guy's name now. That was the drummer originally, but he was replaced by Steve Gadd, and of course Steve Gadd he's still with him today at times, and I think this album, like you said, it's a great album. It was produced by Russ Titleman, so another one of the Russ Titleman produced albums. And that's pretty much all I've got for this one. It was a pretty successful album when it was released, and I'm going here real quick to make sure because he didn't release many albums, studio albums during the '90s. I believe he released only 2 albums. But in '96, I do remember he released the Crossroads 2 box set, and that was live in the '70s. And that was a very cool box set. I used to have a burnt copy of it. Of course, there was a time where when I was small, I didn't take care of my stuff, and they got messed up. But from what I heard, I love that box set. I'm been looking on Amazon to get the actual box set in one of these days. But that's pretty much. You got any thoughts on the Crossroads 2 box set?
Well, I was just kind of talking about that earlier. Live, he does pretty much the same stuff. It was kind of from the era of this kind of the '70s and '80s era, right? So mainly
It was
'70s.
only '70s,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay. It was mainly blues and stuff. But I like the fact that they did release something like this, especially 2 of the box sets, because Clapton's live work is his main really work. I guess I could say, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's that's his thing live mainly. So it's just he it's just where he really does a lot of his repertoire in a different way and adds different things to it and shows off his main guitar skills and such as that. I guess that's about it for me, brother.
All right, and I mean, I wish they would release a Crossroads 3 that went further into like the '80s and '90s, and maybe he'll do something like that one of these days. But then we move on to the next album, and the 1998 album Pilgrim. This is another one I really enjoy. I think it's got a lot of very good songs on it. The production could have been a lot rawer, but I mean, I still like the production. It's an interesting production, and I believe that was produced as well by Russ Titleman. I could be wrong. And this was the first album of brand new. No, it was produced by Simon Climby, who was another longtime Clapton producer. But this was the first album of studio material since Journeyman in 1989, and I've always really kind of liked this album. It's a very very long album. Maybe they could have took some tracks or could have taken some tracks off of this album, but some standouts for me on this album, of course, My Father's Eyes. I like the title track quite a bit as well. The track She's Gone's really awesome. One Chance, River of Tears is awesome. Circus Left Town. Just a great album of tracks. You've got also Sick and Tired, which was a tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimmy Vaughan, and I really like that track. And I didn't really talk about it during the Journeyman thing, but I mean, in 1990 they went on tour, and Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan did a double bill back then. And Stevie Ray Vaughan, after the show was over, Stevie Ray Vaughan was unfortunately killed in a plane crash. And basically, I think Clapton pretty much dedicated the rest of that tour to Stevie Ray Vaughan. And there were some other people. I think some members of Clapton's crew was killed as well in that plane crash. But I mean,
I would like to add also, it was a helicopter, I believe.
yeah, helicopter crash. Yep. But yeah. What's your thoughts on Pilgrim, real quick?
The Pilgrim album, I mentioned earlier that the Circus and My Father's Eyes off of this album would have been better suited for the unplugged, probably. And not that I thought it was filler on this album. I just thought, that it would have went well acoustically, and essentially it still was for Circus. It was still acoustic setting more. My Father's Eyes. Well, this album really, I think, was the fact that he had a lot of stuff that he had written up until that point, and I don't know this for sure. This was kind of my opinion. Probably, he had a lot of stuff that he had written previously, and he had probably just written maybe a song or something that he really wanted to be on an album. So he just decided to do something, kind of more back to his pop years, because he was
Yeah,
obviously getting more towards the latter end of his career, or at least on that side of it anyway. Being 1998, he would have been around 40 and 50 or something along in line. So I'm thinking he probably just did this because he had a lot of material that he had written over a course of probably 10 years, I would say. During the time he was doing that blues, he was probably writing a lot of other stuff, I would imagine.
yeah,
So thing with Clapton is he writes stuff, a certain way, and it has a certain sound to it, and he doesn't really write a lot of blues stuff when he writes it. When he writes a song, it has a little bit more of a softer tone to it than a blues song would. Obviously, other than Same Old Blues or Old Love or something like that, something that he probably made a conservative effort to sound like that
yeah,
because he wanted it to be blues. But other than that, he did a lot more writing earlier in his career and later in his career than he did towards the middle. Really, you can see, like on the Crossroads box set as well, some stuff that's unreleased, like Water on the Ground and Crying and stuff like that he wrote that's acoustic, and it sounds, it doesn't sound like something from that era that he would write, but
yeah,
it is. That's why he didn't release it at that time. And anyway, that's just my opinion about Pilgrim. That it was probably stuff from before that he had written, and he just wanted to put it on an album. And it has a certain sound to it. It kind of reminds me of August a bit in the
yeah,
production. Kind of like going back to what you said about the not raw production. That's the only way I can think of to really,
yeah.
describe it. But
Very
I like,
polished.
yeah, I like the album, and I think it's got all the songs are great in my opinion. I don't have that opinion about all of Clapton's albums, but I don't think this one has any duds or anything per se. This one really good all the way through. Except, like you said, it probably has some filler, but it's still good to me. I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
extended almost like a double album, but that's about all for me, brother.
All right. Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, I mean, it kind of went back to kind of like August being more poppier and had a lot of experiments with like synthesizers and drum machines and stuff like that. But very very polished album. Um, it's got some blues stuff on here. It's another one of those albums that has tons of session musicians and stuff like that on it. But I like this album quite a bit. This is one of the first that I actually had heard of Clapton's, and yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for this album. He released a soundtrack in '99 for a soundtrack called The Story of Us, or a movie called The Story of Us. I don't know anything on it, so I'm not even going to talk about it.
I actually do know one off of that.
Oh,
It's an instrumental. It's all instrumental stuff, I believe. But there is one particular track I like that I've got downloaded on my tablet. It's called "Go to Chow Fun," I believe. It's
oh,
just a good instrumental track. And also he done some instrumental work later. I mean, here recently too. Kind of like that reminds me of that track. One called "For Jack." It was off of I believe a Ginger Baker tribute album, or is it Jack Bruce? I think it was Jack Bruce tribute
yeah,
album live. I don't know if you've heard that one, but that's a good instrumental track also. Just a kind of a side note there.
Okay. But I don't know it, so I mean I don't have much to say about it. But that's pretty much it for Pilgrim. I felt like I didn't cover everything, but I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say about it. And then we moved to 2001, and this particular album I think is what he tried to do with Pilgrim, but I think he did it a lot better here. And I mean, Pilgrim, like you said, it was kind of it seemed like it was a bunch of songs he had written, just put on it to put out an album. And it kind of seemed to me like you saying that it kind of seemed to me like Pilgrim may have like was kind of like a summer project, and like, hey, we're gonna put out an album. Let's put it sort of like Kiss's Hot in the Shade album. Like they put out a lot of tracks on there, kind of just to get the album. And but I like you saying, I like Pilgrim quite a bit. But I mean, Pilgrim, great album. Let's move on to Reptile. I'm fixing to start dragging on here. But Reptile, I think is Pilgrim done very much. I think this album was what he was trying to do with Pilgrim, but I think he did it better. And I think he got much more of a raw produced album out of it. And I mean, the title track on this album is excellent. Got You on My Mind's a great blues cover. Traveling Light. I don't think I remember that one that well. Um, I Want a Little Girl. I remember that. That was off of the live album. Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight. Modern Girl was actually it came from the Pilgrim sessions. It was in a whole totally different arrangement. You've heard that version, haven't you?
Oh yeah.
And it's both. I like both versions of the track. Superman Inside's a really good track as well. One of my personal favorites. Sun and Sylvia, I believe that's an instrumental, and I remember liking that one. There's a bonus track called Losing Hand. I don't know that one.
Oh yeah,
But
that one was one off of a CD that I got in in a shop in a small CD shop in Foley. And
okay,
it was a single. Uh, it was a single off that album, Reptile. It had 3 songs on it. Losing Hand was one of them. Uh, I can't remember the other 2. It was a single though.
yeah. But you saying it now, I think I have, because I think you had told me about it and I looked it up. So I think I may have heard it actually. But you take Reptile real quick, Steven.
Okay, Reptile. For me, I love the production on Reptile. It might have, in my opinion, it might have a little filler. Like some of the stuff sounds like it could have been on a soundtrack versus an album. Especially like some of the instrumental stuff on it. I think it might even have 2 tracks, if I'm not mistaken. But from this, basing from the stuff that was left off the album versus what was on the album, I do agree with. I see the thought process but as to why they would put that on there, because I mean, just putting another standard sounding blues track on there, I mean, it's kind of anticlimactic, really. I think that the album overall was really well done and really well thought out as far as the overall structure of it. As far as the songs that were put on there and the production, I don't really know how to describe the production. I just like the production. It's very different than how it would sound live, in my opinion. Not very different, but it just has kind of a brighter sound to it that you can't really get live much unless you have a lot of synthesizers or something like that. But I love the work. I don't know if I know Billy Preston was doing some work with him around this time. I don't know if he plays on this album. I think he might have.
I think he does actually.
Yeah, I've always liked Billy Preston. I think he does some good work on this album. Well, I guess that's about it for that one, brother. I like all the songs for sure. And I believe he wrote a lot of the material. So around this
Yeah,
time, he was doing a lot of writing, kind of leading into the Back Home album. I know that's probably not next, but uh, the Back Home, he did a lot around this era writing for that too.
yeah. But backtracking real quick to 2000, the Riding with the King album, BB King and Eric Clapton. Have you heard that one?
Oh yes, I got it downloaded on my tablet. Yeah, I've heard that one quite a bit.
I like the title track quite a bit. I remember some other stuff on there, like "Marry You" was pretty good, but I don't remember a whole lot of other stuff. I have the CD up here somewhere, but I don't remember that
That
much.
one to me is a very good album because it's very much based around like any BB King album. It's based around the guitar of BB King. I think that's the main reason why it's such a good album. And Eric does, I mean, pretty much the same amount of guitar work on it. But I just love how BB King just works, the guitar into throughout the whole song. He
Yeah,
does. Well, he does that with all his music, though. He does the intro with the guitar, then he plays pretty much throughout the whole song, and then he probably plays solo, you know, 9 times out of 10 on every song, and then see, you know what I'm saying? Like he plays more overall than a lot of players do. You know,
yeah,
as far as long or length of time and just throughout the whole song, it just kind of sculpts the whole song.
yeah,
Adds a different element to the music.
yeah. But is that all you got for that album?
Well, I'm not sure. Do you know about who wrote the songs for this album?
Or "Riding with
Were
the
they
King"?
were they all covers?
No, I think some of them were written by Clapton. Hold on a minute, and I'll look because I don't really know. But
I've always wondered because I've always heard the songs and I hadn't heard it anywhere else. So
yeah, yeah, this was pretty much people had written. It was covers by different people. It was either people had written the songs for them, or either it was there's some BB King tracks on here. So I don't know.
all right, brother.
Uh,
So you want to move on to the what's the next one?
Well, the next one is "One More Car, One More Rider" from 2002. I've heard this album. I've never heard it in its entirety, but I've heard most of the tracks on it. I like the acoustic version of "Bell Bottom Blues" quite a bit. "Reptile" goes really well live. Um, you got You on My Mind. You got "Key to the Highway." A great version of "She's Gone." A great version of "River of Tears." Hoochie Coochie Man and Have You Ever Loved a Woman's great. Overall, a great live album. If I'm not bad wrong, this was actually conceived to be his last album. So it was that was kind of the novelty with the album itself. And this was supposed to be his last record, and of course we're going to continue. So it isn't, but he also did a show that's out there on YouTube from the Budokan in 2001, which is a very good show as well. Very similar to this one. The only thing is, I don't think Billy Preston's with him. I think it's Greg Gaines. But it's pretty much both the same sets, except I think they perform Layla twice, and I think they take out "Have You Ever Loved a Woman" and put in "5 Long Years." But Steven, what's your thoughts on "One More Car, One More Rider" from 2002?
Well, the main difference between this and a lot of the other live things that Clapton does is Billy Preston. Pretty
Yep.
much, he's kind of the it factor here. He really adds a good element to anything he's involved with. Uh, he's I like the fact that he adds stuff throughout the whole song. Throughout the whole album, but throughout the whole song on every song. Basically, what I'm trying to say is he really took these songs and kind of almost made them his own, to where he added, like, for example, on Bell Bottom Blues, he took that song and added a whole nother riff to it, and that became the main riff of the song, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
you'd have to go listen to it to know what I mean, but like, go listen to that organ part that he adds to that song in particular. He just takes all these songs and just basically just kind of like makes them complete, almost a completely different song, because he adds such memorable, you know, stuff all over the album, you know. So
Yeah,
I'm very glad that Eric did this album with not Phil, you know, him on the album, Billy Preston, because I think that's probably the main reason he did this album, because I've heard through the grapevine that he did that really a lot of these live albums that Clapton does is just because he wanted to make a live album, or an album at least, for every band that he has, you know. And really,
yeah,
he had played for this band he had here from about that point on till now. Well, he's retired now, but he still plays every once in a while, and he still has that, you know, core band with, you know, Steve Gadd and Nathan East. That those two together really do good.
yeah.
They have a you know, and Eric, of course, have a great, you know,
Chemistry.
they work well together.
They have a great chemistry. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
yeah, chemistry. But then we move to the next track, and I mean the next album. Man, we're reviewing albums today.
Yeah,
But the next one he did, 10 years after his first all blues album, he does another, and this is kind of like, I've kind of viewed this one as From the Cradle Part Two, even though this one is specifically a cover of a particular artist, and the album is Me and Mr. Johnson. This was released in 2004. This was the first album by Clapton since 2001. So I remember liking this album quite a bit. It's got a very similar production um, compared to From the Cradle. I think it's got several of the same members. This was another Simon Climby album, and so a different group of people. I mean, but it's got the same lineup pretty much as One More Car, One More Rider, but with like a few people from the Cradle album appearing. And I like this album quite a bit. Me and you, I turned you onto this album, right, Steven?
yeah, but that was before I was even into Clapton in the first place, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you take this one real quick, Steven.
Well, as opposed to what you said, I kind of think of this album as in a different light as From the Cradle, um, for a particular reason, because I don't think it was really it was not in the time period to where he was touring with all blues, or to where that's not all he was had going on at the time. So really, the if you know the backstory, that it would make even more sense to you. So the backstory is that this album wasn't really supposed to be a Robert Johnson album. It was supposed to be just a normal studio album, and then the more, you know, they got Billy Preston involved, and they got the whole Steve Gadd, you know, people like that involved in it, and so pretty much it just turned into that, because they just kept on, you know, playing these songs and having a good time, really, with the you know, whole setup of it. So they just kept making these songs, and Clapton said really before they even knew it, they had enough material for a whole album. So they just kind of released it as that, and then obviously they made the live in the studio, you know, DVD from that, which is a completely different thing, with the different. I think Chris Staten is on that, and I don't think Chris Staten is even on the original album, is he?
I don't really know.
It seems like you told me that before, that Chris Staten didn't even play on the original, you know, for Me and Mr. Johnson. So Anyway, like you said, the
Well,
songs are going to sound the same.
he
Like you
didn't.
said,
He's not on it.
and I didn't think so, but really, Billy Preston did a great job. He didn't play as big of as a role as I would have liked, but he he uh, he added some good stuff in there as well as Clapton. This is not the blues. Is not where this is not the kind of blues. This is a different kind of blues, really, than the stuff from the Cradle. It's not stuff that's guitar based necessarily. Uh, Rhythm wise, it is, but not really a lot of solo stuff going on there. It's mainly just standardized. It's really what it is just standard blues because Robert Johnson was the very, you know, original blues man, pretty much. I mean, the most popular one to start with. He was the
Yeah.
only one at the time, but he's pretty much brought it into the light, of the public, pretty much. So because of Crossroads and all those great songs and that other people covered over the years live so much.
Yep.
So really, I think that's the whole reason for this album too was that he wrote on. I've got the CD, and Clapton has a wrote in the sleeve that uh, from the time he was smaller, he would always listen to Robert Johnson, and it's just he kind of made it all. The guitar techniques he uses, are kind of the foundation for the blues. I guess if you're not a guitarist, you wouldn't understand what I mean, but like if you are, the some of the main things like for example Leonard Skinner uses Eric Clapton uses those main concepts for the blues. He came up with those guitar styles. He started all
Yeah.
that. And so basically he was just saying on the sleeve that the people don't realize it's kind of like J.J. Cale too. He did the same thing with J.J. Cale, made a complete album about him. I mean, of his songs. So, you know,
Yeah.
also did an album with him.
Yeah.
So
I
I
was
guess
gonna
that's
get
about
that.
all for that one.
But he also released sessions for Robert J in 2004. Is that the same thing, or do you know?
That's the DVD, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay. I think it says they released a CD too, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's the CD too. But what I'm saying is, it was filmed. It was basically done to be filmed in the studio, done,
Okay. But
which is very rare. Like I don't know if I've ever heard of a filmed in studio deal like that. Have you?
I haven't either. But then we go to the next. Are you done with the sessions for Robert J?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we go to the next track. Another Simon Climby produced album, and we're kind of winding down here now with the releases. We still got a good little bit to go, but Back Home released in 2005. I don't know this album. This is getting into another group of albums that I don't particularly know, but I do know one track, Revolution. I that track because it was on a compilation I have. But you know this album, Steven?
Well, I've got it on CD and I've listened to it a couple of times all the way through, of sorts. And I think Back Home itself, the song, is a great track. A lot of stuff, a lot of originals by Clapton. That was probably why this whole album was done. Kind of in the same light as Pilgrim in my mind, because at this time, within about a year or so previous to this, he was probably doing a lot of writing. Um, and what was this, about 2004?
It's 2005.
Okay, 2005. This was also the year he did the Cream reunion concert, but that's a side note. Um, and so he probably had been doing a lot of writing. He had just not just got married, but he had kind of started to have kids about this time, and you can kind of hear that in his writing. And in the
Yeah,
Back Home album, there's a song specifically about called "I'm So Tired." I think it's called. Um, and it's about him having to take care of babies pretty much. And
Yeah.
about this time, he would have been having an infant and probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 year old or something like that. Now he's got about 3 or 4 daughters.
Yeah.
So they're getting to be about teenagers now, about our age. But uh, anyway, that's what that album was kind of in spirit of, was that. And he's probably doing a lot of touring about this time, so he probably just he was kind of doing a lot of work. So he just kind of in the process had a lot of writing going on. So I guess that's about all for me, brother.
All right, and then we moved to 2006, I believe. This is Eric Clapton and J.J. Cale's "The Road to Escondido," produced once again by Simon Climby. This was supposedly the final sessions for Billy Preston. Of course, Billy Preston will pass away, and unfortunately, and this is another one that I don't know. I know one track on here, "Anyway the Wind Blows," but that's pretty much it. I mean, this was kind of at the point, I think, when Clapton kind of started going to a lot of his influences and was kind of trying to either collaborate with them or kind of pay tribute to them, and kind of reconnecting with a lot of different people, especially with the Crossroads festivals and stuff starting around this point, or actually a couple of years prior in 2004. But I mean, I don't know about this album. I've never heard this album. So you take it, Stephen. Do you know this album very well?
Well, not totally, no. I think it's a pretty good overall album. I guess I think that about all the albums, but I guess that's all about I can say. I haven't, like, I'm kind of like you on the subject. I haven't really heard it that much.
Okay. And the next album that he released, I want to say, is the Steve Winwood live album from 2009, live from Madison Square Garden. And I've heard part of this album before. I really like this album quite a bit. It's got some great tracks on this album. It's got a great version of Forever Man, which was awesome to hear him kind of bring that back. Bunch of Blind Faith stuff, some Steve Winwood solo stuff thrown in there as well, and some stuff from his band Traffic as well, I believe. And some covers, some different type covers. And this is around the point that kind of Steve Winwood and Clapton kind of reconnected, especially when they were doing the Crossroads festivals in 2000, in the mid to late 2000s. But I like this live album quite a bit, and I know Steven likes this album quite a bit as well. So, Steven, go ahead and take this.
Oh yes, you would be right about that, brother. Like you said, lots of Blind Faith stuff from this, but the idea is that uh, you know they were going to choose between their own repertoire at first. This was the first original idea for it, and that Steve was gonna choose from Eric's repertoire on the other way around. So that way that Clapton said that he works better when other people kind of point out the songs that are more significant, and he just
Yeah,
does them, that he does it his own way. He said, but he just needs other people more to kind of point the direction out as far as that goes, because he's had a history. He said even himself, and I kind of agree with this. He said the songs that he picks out to do, it's like he people don't take to him as well as stuff that other people suggest that he does. Like, for
yeah,
example, kind of going back to "I Shot the Sheriff" on 461 Ocean Boulevard. That one, well, he did not even want to cut that in the first place, nor did he want to release it after the final product was done.
yeah. I've heard that before. Yeah,
But he said when it was released, it went straight to number one,
yep,
to his utter surprise, or I think in his own words, utter astonishment or something like that. So he said from then on he learned to just let other people just kind of direct what he does, because he said the stuff he chooses to do is just, it doesn't work as well, you know.
Yeah.
So, but overall, great album, and there's also some good guitar work by Steve Winwood as
Yeah.
well.
He's very
There's
underrated guitarist. Yeah.
yeah, and also there's one track that there's dual guitar, not dual, but they're playing their solo at the same time, different
Oh, that,
solos,
yeah.
and just overall, just great instrumentation, and that's really what this album is about. Not really about making any huge statements about new content. It's more about taking old content and putting a good live, you know, sound to it, basically.
Yeah.
All this stuff was pretty much stuff that both of them have been involved with the exception of a few, which was neither one of them had anything to do with before, um, which was change.
Them
Mine through
change.
so many changes. Yeah, them changes. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. That one
That
was
was a Buddy
Buddy
Miles.
Miles. And I would like to add too, they said that one was weird because they chose to do that song, and then before the actual show he passed away.
Yep. Yep. I've heard that too.
Yeah, I watched. That's on the DVD where they talked about that. So they just dedicated it to him, and so they said that was kind of spooky stuff. In Clapton's words. So anyway, I guess that's about all for that one, bro.
All right, and now we're kind of getting kind of on the downside now of kind of getting toward the end of the discography, but the 2010 album by Clapton, this was another one I believe produced by, no, this was not. This was not produced by Simon Climie. This album was called Clapton. It was released in 2010. This is another one I don't know that very well. I think I remember traveling alone.
Yeah, because
Or
we was gonna do a version of that.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Autumn Leaves. I think I remember as well. But those two are pretty much the only two I remember off the album. To me, this has more from what I can see. It has more of kind of a laid back kind of jazz type feel to it. But like I said, I've never heard it in its entirety to know. I only remember a couple of tracks off the album. So, Steven, you take this album now. Do you know it that very well?
uh, Not totally, and I haven't even listened to it in its entirety, but I have heard bits and pieces. Um, Really, it's a very diverse album. It goes from blues to jazz to no. I mean, like some of the songs, I don't even know what genre it is,
Yeah,
but it's just kind of in between, sort of. I like the album, and it has some really good background vocals to it. How deep is the ocean? Stuff like that. You know, there was one track in particularly I like. Let's see, Diamonds from the Rain, I think it's called. I really like that one. I don't know if you've ever heard it.
I
Uh,
have.
See, that's my point. It really doesn't stick to any kind of genre or really any one production. Really,
Yeah,
it kind of. I mean, it's different songs are produced differently, and because they're different genres. So you can't really speak as for the album as a one genre. Really, I mean,
yeah,
and really, I was kind of wondering myself what really brought on the making of this album, because it's totally unlike Clapton to go anything like jazz. He did it with Wynton Marsalis, but other than that, really never. Uh, and really, it's kind of a mix between the bulk of the album is a mix between jazz and kind of soft rock feel, something like that, in my opinion. And I like the album. And it really diverse album. That's all I can have to say about it. Really diverse.
yeah. And then we moved to, like you were just talking about, Winston Marsalis. Play the Blues live from Jazz at Lincoln Center. I don't know this album very well, so I think I remember the version of Layla on here was pretty good. But you take this one, Steven, and we'll get on through here.
All right, brother. This is one that I'm going to know a lot about because, or at least my opinion about, because I've listened to it quite a bit on my tablet. Layla is a complete masterpiece on this version. Um, it's a masterpiece to begin with, as we mentioned on earlier reviews. But this one is really, he does a great job with Wynton Marsalis to do with the horns. Um, in particular, and Eric's playing really made this. It's a kind of a slow version, really even slower than the Unplugged. It just moves along so, like kind of just shuffly, but like real slow. And Eric just he uses the ES-335 on this whole album, and I think that he should really stick to that because his style is different when he plays different guitars, as well as the sound, obviously. And I think he really should have stuck to this style. He really brought the blues to the jazz setting. That's really what it was. It was a jazz band playing, complete jazz, and then he brought blues guitar playing and songs to the table. That's basically what this album was.
Yeah.
And the idea was for Wynton Marsalis and Eric Clapton to make a New Orleans style jazz album with blues songs.
Yeah.
So, stuff like 44, stuff that's been staples throughout his career. Well, no, not his career. Throughout the 90s, I'd say. He done 44 a lot. He did stuff like, 95-ish. 1995, he did all these songs just about on this album live. But they weren't on from the cradle, but they were done live quite a bit.
Yeah. And I remember 44, so yeah, I know that one. But,
in fact, we've done that one too. So
yeah.
And I would also like to say that the album, it really has a lot of good arrangement by Wynton Marsalis, and I don't listen to a lot of jazz, but I would say he's probably the top dog best in the field as far as that goes. Arrangement and his own playing, I believe he plays the trumpet, so or something like that. So great arrangement all around on the album. It's really a masterpiece. Even someone that doesn't really listen to jazz like myself, you can kind of relate to it,
Yeah.
So I guess that's about it for me, brother.
All right. And then we go to 2013, March 12th, 2013, and he releases the album Old Sock, his 19th studio album. This is another one I don't know. I think this was around the point where he started getting a lot of guest musicians to come out and play with him here and there. And only one I really remembered is "Gotta Get Over." I like that track. He did a cover of the Gary Moore blues song, "Still Got the Blues," and it was a cool version of the song. But I mean, comparing it, I mean Gary Moore's version from back in the early 90s, I believe 1990. It was much more of a slow, very much. It was an electrical blues song. But I think Clapton basically, if I'm remembering right, he basically turned it into kind of a more jazzier, slow blues song. And I do remember that off of there. But other than that, I don't remember anything else off that album other than those two tracks. So you know this album very good, Stephen?
Yeah, I know it. I know it fairly well. I've got a couple of tracks off this album downloaded on my tablet. I listen to just about weekly. And there's one called Angel, I believe, written by J.J. Cale, if I'm not mistaken. And it seems like there's a lot of stuff on this album. Well, not a lot, but there's a couple that seems like if it's not written by J.J. Cale, it's kind of inspired by J.J. Cale. This was about the time that he would have been really into that stuff and kind of, you know, not newly discovering, but kind of just really going into his stuff.
Yeah, this is around the time J.J. Cale died too. So
yeah, that's another reason. Yeah,
he
but
passed away.
Also, there was a track. There was two tracks that I really love on it, and all three of these tracks I'm talking about have great guitar work over it. I'm pretty sure it's Eric. But this sound he doesn't use, and he doesn't have this guitar sound in any other album or song. But there's one called "When Your Well Runs Dry." I love that one. Great guitar work, and Every Little Thing has great guitar work. And these are really, this whole album is more towards the kind of not popish, but a little bit towards a little bit of pop, a little bit of kind of a softer sound to it.
Yeah.
Kind of a not so much of a dark tone as far as the lyrics go and all that, like blues as he's been so accustomed to. Probably because he's got his life straight now, and he's been sober for good little while now, a good 20 years, something like that now. So, or up to this date, and really, I think he's starting to write. He's starting to show that in his writing and around this time. And like I said, the guitar work on this album is just great. It's like he comes out as a whole nother player, He just reinvents himself. I would go so far as to say, in his lead work over the top of it, and would continue this pretty much through the rest of his albums, his solo albums from this point.
Yeah.
So I guess that's all I got to say about that one, brother.
All right, and then we move to, and we can try kind of make this one here quick. I mean, this is not more. I'll talk about the last three live albums after we're done with the studio records. But Crossroads Guitar Festival 2013, you have this one. I mean, it's just basically it's a bunch of different musicians coming together. It's a bunch of different people, not just Clapton. Some very good tracks on here. I mean, you've got a good version of "Sunshine of Your Love," a great version of "Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad" with the Allman Brothers Band. Got to Get Better in a Little While. "Key to the Highway" with Keith Richards. Your thoughts, real quick, on this album. I mean, it's credited as an official Clapton live album. So,
my thoughts on this one is, it's not really my favorite concept for anything Clapton. If it, because I'm a big Clapton fan, and really, when you have so many musicians doing so many different songs, it's not really to be considered Clapton anymore. It's really like, it's more should be considered just kind of a benefit concert that it is,
yeah,
towards the Antigua Crossroads, center in Antigua, obviously. And he had the auction for that and sold all the guitars, and this is another way to fund that. And really, the music itself is kind of all over the place, to be honest. Well, pretty much like any festival would be, because you have so many different bands and people come on there, and I like it. I like it really as more of a benefit concert. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Rather than just a Clapton, solo or whatever concert. So
Yeah.
I guess that's all for that one, bro.
All right, we can just get through these last few real quick because I think we're almost 2 hours going on this one. But
yeah.
The next album he released is another collaboration. This was a tribute album released in 2014. The Breeze and Appreciation of J.J. Cale. The only one I remembered off of this album was the track "Call Me the Breeze." His cover of that, which is he covered the original version, not the Skinner version. And I mean, I like that version of the track. It's one of his more modern day. It's kind of looked back on more as kind of a more classic kind of track. But I remember there's another track, Magnolia, which I've known that track for a while. I believe Willie Nelson is the one who covers that. And that was a pretty good version of the song. But I don't know this album very well. Once again, what about you, Steven? You know this album?
Now, honestly, I thought it was John Mayer that did the Magnolia. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
it was him then. Yeah.
And
I'm not sure.
Tom Petty plays on this album. Well, not plays. Well, he might, but he probably just sings on it. Uh, Let me see. There's a couple of different artists on it. The main ones would be Willie Nelson and Tom Petty and uh, John Mayer. Like you said before, the interview for this album about about JJ about the JJ album was Clapton said that John Mayer came in and did his tracks in one setting really, and you know, in one take, and he said that's when he thought John Mayer was really the master guitarist. He said, um, and I haven't really got much into John Mayer, but before, I don't like his main stuff really that much, to be honest. But I think when he
Yeah.
starts getting into blues and stuff, he really kind of knows what he's doing. Because kind of to get sidetracked a bit here, Broken Hearted by Clapton, that was on Pilgrim. He did live with John Mayer. He did a great
Yeah.
job on that. John Mayer did. And so just overall, what I'm trying to get at is John Mayer kind of had a lot to do with this album, I believe, and mainly because Clapton kind of just had started to see how John Mayer really was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I guess that's about it, brother.
All right, and then we move to the next studio album. Like I said, we'll talk about some of the other live albums here in a few minutes. I still do. To me, a very huge return to form. I mean, not only with who was producing, but I think this album all overall was kind of a return to form for Clapton. And this was the first to feature Glenn Johns as producer since Backless in '78. And I don't know who produced a lot just one night. He may have. I don't really know, but I mean, this was the first to feature Glenn Johns as producer in a very, very long time. And I like some tracks off here. Somebody's Knocking, I remember, was a very good song. Um, I mean, overall, now thinking about it, now I don't remember nothing off of it. But I
I
like
still
this
do.
album. Yeah, yeah, I still do. I like
2000.
this album quite a bit, and I remember I heard it. It was kind of a surprise for me to hear that it was coming out because I thought Clapton was pretty much done as far as recording and stuff like that. But yeah, that's here. Hold on a second. I'm getting the album out. I've got it right here beside me. Um, I remember Alabama Woman Blues. Spiral was pretty good. Pretty good. Catch the Blues. Somebody's Knocking. Um, Stones in My Passageway. I may have already said that one. Little Man, You've Had a Busy Day. That was pretty good. I Dreamed I Saw St. Augustine. Like I said, I like this album. I thought this album was very good. It had a very cool lineup. Paul Carrack on vocals and Hammond organ, Chris Stanton on keyboards, Simon Climby on keyboards. You had Dave Bronze coming back from the Cradle. He also had Henry Spinetti playing drums, and Andy Fairweather Low was back on this album. And I mean, overall, to me, I think it was a good kind of return for Clapton. And as of now, this is kind of his final studio album of new material. Of course, we'll get into the next album here in a few minutes. But you take this one, Stephen.
Well, I've watched the interview for this one, and as far as the playing, Clapton's playing, he had to play a lot of slide on the ES-335 because he was having a lot of trouble with his hands and breaking out all over his arms with rashes and all kind of stuff. I don't know exactly what he had, but
Eczema.
okay, yeah, that's right. And well, this album, it has some really off color, I would describe, guitar work on it. You can get some really different and weird sounds out of a slide, and he took full advantage of that. Um, Especially on certain tracks. Catch the Blues was written by Eric, um, as well as some other ones on this album, mainly covers on the album. Um, really, Catch the Blues was the most unique one on the album. I'm kind of copycatting when I say that because that's what Glenn Johns said, and I kind of agree with him. But Glenn Johns, I think he did a great job. Production, really, that's all I can think of. All the songs are good. From that point on, Somebody's Knocking. Really, he did that every show pretty much.
Yeah.
He didn't do as much writing for this album as usual, but turned out pretty well in my opinion.
Yeah.
Some Bob Dylan, a lot of Bob Dylan stuff on it too.
Yeah. But
So yeah.
now we go to the final Eric Clapton album to date, released October 12th, 2018. This was another one that was kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't exactly know was coming out until it actually was released. Happy Christmas, released 2018. This is his first Christmas album, and it features a couple of new tracks, and I have that here as well. And I like that album. Okay. I heard it. I listened to it back during Christmas. White Christmas, real cool. For Love on Christmas Day, I thought was a good version. The Jingle Bells version was also interesting. But overall, I thought it was a very good album. It features Simon Climie again, so he was producing. And like I said, up until here recently, this is his last album so far. And what's your thoughts on the Christmas album?
For Love on Christmas Day, I believe that was an original.
It was, yeah.
But for Eric, he co-wrote it. Well, the story goes that he came up with the lyrics, and Simon Climie, or however you say his name, Climie, okay, and so he came up with the melody on the piano and such, and he also, I believe he played some guitar on the album as well.
I believe he did too.
He can be seen on the music videos, especially White Christmas, playing acoustic guitar. Yeah, and I believe he does on the album because it looks like he's really playing. So I mean the actual stuff. So that's the thing with these sound engineers and all that, is they actually know the music very thoroughly as well.
Well, it says he only. Go ahead.
Pretty much the he made some contributions is what I can tell from the credits to the album as well.
Yeah.
What are we gonna say, brother?
In the booklet it says Simon Climie played keyboards, percussion, vocals, and he done some programming. So it doesn't say guitar, but he could. I don't know. I don't really. But that's what it says in the booklet.
Okay. Well, I mean, it like acoustic guitar on a song or on an album like this doesn't have a big impact really on the sound. It's just kind of a filler in the background, to kind of fill the sound out. Anyway,
He
so
he could have just been put in the video just to play the guitar. I don't know.
no, but he was actually playing the chords though and stuff. He was actually playing the right chords. So
Yeah, there ain't no telling.
but overall, this is an album that I listened to thoroughly a lot. Mainly because I hadn't lived through many Clapton albums to where I was as much into him as I am now. Uh, you know, Obviously I was born in 2003 and there was a lot of albums released, but I wasn't really that much into him then. And I probably wasn't even aware that much of him in the first place. So,
Yeah,
but this was 2 years after the I Still Do album was released, and I thought for sure he was done, like you said, after that. But now he's come out with that one, so and did a magnificent job. I think I've always particularly liked the production on this album.
yeah,
He says some Simon Clement produced it. I think
yeah,
he did a very good job mixing the instruments, and overall I think it's a little bit more of a on the polished side of production in my mind. And I think it's a really good culmination of Christmas songs, and really only one original, but it doesn't really matter with Clapton because he completely redid all these songs and put them into a blues format.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess that's all for me, bro.
All right, and really, I mean that the name of that song "For Love on Christmas Day." To be honest, I mean it really it could be just a standalone Clapton song, and I really like that. So
Oh yeah,
it didn't even have to be on there. From what I heard, he just basically I think changed the title. So,
yeah. I thought about mentioning that, but I thought that was you know.
but yeah, I want to go through some other stuff real quick. We're done with the studio album, so we made it through that, and most of the prior live albums. There's some other live albums out there as well. Slow Hand at 70. I have that on DVD and CD. I've never watched the DVD. I listened to the CD. I liked the album. I thought it was a very good album. It was one of those I kind of thought was going to be his last album. But you've heard this album, haven't you? Or at least watched the movie?
Oh yes, oh yes. I've listened to it quite a bit. Watched it on my tablet. Yeah.
Okay, and you like this one?
Yeah, the Slow Hand at 70. Yeah, it's pretty much the same things he's been doing about this time live. It was kind of thought of, like you said. He said that he wasn't in the best condition during this time period that it was filmed, but it was at the Royal Albert Hall, which is a place he really liked to play a lot. So, um, and I don't really know how it came about that they even did this live album, but uh, because, like I said earlier, he liked to do different bands and stuff, but that really is the same band as from the movie Planes, Trains, and Eric.
Yeah,
From that band, it's 14 tracks on that movie, and it's basically the same band and the same songs, but it's just great band. Even though all the band members are getting pretty up there in age, and it still sounds really good. So as long I mean they could release something every year and I'd be good with it even if it was the same songs.
yeah,
That's
and
my opinion about that.
okay, okay. Well, we are back. There was a slight interrupt, but we are back, and we're going to go through the final few Clapton releases that's been out. We're going to talk about some of the other live albums. Now on to the next one. We left off with Slow Hand at 70. The Crossroads Revisited selections from the Crossroads Guitar Festivals. Do you know this one, Stephen?
I've heard, yeah, I've seen the track listing. Um, it's basically just stuff that is taken from each Crossroads festival. That was what every so few years, 4 or something like that. And it's just taken and like put into one big album. The best stuff from each one from what I gather. Is that what it is, brother?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't have it. I was gonna try to get it, but I haven't found it anywhere. But that's basically what it is. It I mean, it's basically pretty much an amalgamation of stuff from those different years, and he's done a new one now. But is that all you got to say on that one?
Yeah, I've just looked at the track listing, and it's basically it's not anything unreleased. I don't guess it's just stuff that was already released on the Crossroads sets, you know.
But now we go to the final live album so far, Live in San Diego. I believe this was another one kind of released as a tribute to J.J. Cale because he guests on this particular show, as does Robert Cray and I believe Doyle Bramhall II. I've heard a couple of tracks from this album. I don't know this album very well, but what about you, Steven? You know this album?
What is it called?
It's called Live from San Diego.
Oh yeah, yeah. See that one. That was from 2007, something like that.
I think that was when it was recorded. It was released in 2016.
I didn't know that. I've always just seen it as 2007. I didn't know it was released then. But anyway, I've seen bits and pieces of it's a very very kind of gleamy production of the stuff. Like good, it's a good version of "Wonderful Tonight" on it, and Layla and those main things. And also there's stuff, there's material from the Derek and the Dominoes original, well, their only album. Any Day, I believe "Keep on Growing" might be on there. I'm not sure about that, but there's just stuff from that era on there as well, and it's got Derek Trucks on there as well.
Yeah,
I think is it?
Yeah, he's on there.
I could have been confusing it, but I guess it is.
I believe I saw him on the personnel list.
Yeah, I am thinking about the same show then. Yeah, because the sit down part is the only part JJ's on, I believe.
Yeah, but before we end things here, I want to talk about the different compilations. There's some here I've never heard of, like the history of Eric Clapton. I've never heard anything about Eric Clapton at his best. I've seen this at a vinyl store before, so I've seen that one. There's a Clapton compilation. It's just called Clapton, and it's basically a close up of the shot from the first solo album. Stepping Out's another one. I've never heard of that one. Timepieces. I used to have that on CD. I've heard of that one. There's also a Timepieces 2 Live in the 70s, which is basically kind of a greatest hits of all of his live albums up to that point. Or Backtracking, I've heard of. It's like a 2-disc set. There's the Cream of Eric Clapton, which was released in '87. And Crossroads box set, of course, we've talked about. Story, I've heard of that, the Eric Clapton Story. Stages, I've heard of. The Cream of Clapton, I have that. It's another version. Blues is a very good compilation. Clapton Chronicles is very good. Mark Scorsese presents the blues. Eric Clapton's very good. 20th Century Masters is cool as well. And then the Complete Clapton is a very good. Icon and Forever Man. What's some of your favorite compilations, Stephen?
Probably my favorite compilation would be either probably Clapton Chronicles.
Chronicles, yeah.
Is that the one in 1999?
No, that's what is that one called? That's the one in '99's got the new tracks on it, I believe. What's that called? I know exactly.
Well, yeah, anyway,
And Chronicles, yeah, that's from '99. Yeah,
Okay, I thought so.
I was
That's
confused
my
with
that's
Clapton.
my
Yeah,
favorite. That's my favorite compilation there. Because it has Blue Eyes Blue. That's a good song there.
yeah,
That wasn't on an album. That seems like one that would fit well on Pilgrim, wouldn't it?
yeah. And but,
Yeah. I don't know. Timepieces is good. The main stuff I like though is the ones with the unreleased stuff on it, like the blues. That was also a real good one
yeah, Blues was a great. It was a great one.
because it had 3 or 4 songs period that had never been released before that were written by Clapton and just never put on anything.
Yeah, and the weird thing you talking about timepieces really quickly again. The weird thing with that one though is that I have the cassette version, and it was a hand me down from my father and all. But the weird thing about that one, the CD I used to have had the studio version of Cocaine on it. I almost said cocaine, but it has the studio version of Cocaine on the CD. I have the cassette; it's got the live version. So it's weird. I've never. It's kind of weird, but I think that pretty much wraps up. This will be this will be a two-parter. The first part, of course, will be reviewing up to Money and Cigarettes, and then this will be of course there was an interruption in between, so I'm gonna have to edit these two together. But this will be from the cradle up to present, as well as compilations. There's a there's all kinds of Eric Clapton stuff out there. I think we've covered the basis for what his discography is. Um, there's all sorts of stuff. Bootlegs there's all sorts of stuff out there. You find all kinds of stuff on YouTube. All sorts of DVDs he's released, and maybe we'll come back and do like some of our favorite concert movies or something like that one of these days. But this will be released on the Dungan-Mott Movie and Music podcast page on YouTube, as well as Anchor podcasting platform. And you got any final thoughts on the discography of Clapton, Stephen?
I don't know if there's anyone else in the history of anything that has been covered as much as Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
He has been very, very well documented, and pretty much that's all I could say. Like even the stuff that's not, you know, in parentheses released, you know, like pretty much it's on YouTube. I mean, there's bukus of stuff on YouTube as well, just from live stuff that was filmed for
Yeah.
something and it wasn't released or whatever the case may be. He's probably the most well, known, you know, worldwide person that's ever been.
Yeah. But
And he's been doing it for ever since he was probably 17 or 18. So that's a pretty good while. I'd say about 50 years.
definitely. But that's pretty much all I've got. If you like these albums, go out and buy them. That's what they're there for, is for you to support the artists. Um, for the most part, I think he's got a pretty solid discography. There's some hit misses there, here and there. Some stuff I don't really know. Some stuff maybe I need to check out. And yeah, I can't think of too much of anything else to talk about really. Um, I think we've covered the basis on everything. And you got anything else to say, Stephen?
Oh, not much, brother. I guess that's about all I got to say.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Dungan-Mott podcast. Music. Oh, good Lord, I missed it. That's the first. I knew I was going to do it eventually, but this has been another episode of the Dungan-Mott Music and Movie Podcast, and I think I got it right that time, didn't I, Steven?
Yes, brother, you did.
All right, but that's. I don't know when this episode will be out. Hopefully pretty soon. Like I said, it'll go up on the Anchor podcasting platform as well as the YouTube page that we have. Um, I'm gonna do some slight editing just to kind of add things to put things together here and there.
And
But
Anchor distributes it to different
yeah,
podcasts and things where to just about wherever you can get podcasts.
yeah. But that's pretty much it, I think. And I mean, go support both of our YouTube channels. Devin Dunnigan. Just you type that in, I should come up. Stephen Mott as well. I don't think there's many Stephen Motts or Devin Dunnigans on YouTube, but yeah, I have a Facebook page for this podcast as well. If you want to join it, please. We got several members on there. I've put up the podcast on there. I mean, if you like this, please share it, spread the word, and yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say. This will probably be up after either before or after the Kiss episode, which we've recorded. I'm not real sure. No, it probably will be up afterwards. So it all depends. But we hope you all enjoyed this episode. Please like, listen, share, spread the word. I mean, get this podcast out there. And this has been Brother Z and Elwood. We just want to thank you all for watching or listening. And God bless you all. And as I say on my YouTube reviews, see you next time.